going to be fun to watch this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard Dan Dockage on Dan Patrick yesterday give an overall summation of, and you take Dan for what it is. You either like him or you don't. He's going to give you his way of looking at things. But what he said was how he would sum the NBA draft up on the Dan Patrick show yesterday was shooters, shooters, and more shooters. If that's really all the NBA cares about is shooters, would you say that would be something that we could at least agree on this with Dan on?
Oh no, absolutely. It's kind of like what I just mentioned. When you got centers in the league like Brook Lopez shooting 5 3-point attempts a night, you've got to have. Jokic has a 3-point shot. Jusuf Nurkic out of Portland has a 3-point shot. These quote unquote big men that are supposed to be bangers down low have a 3-point shot, and that's just the way the NBA is going. You need your center to be able on that pick and roll to step out and hit the three. And I think the majority, besides maybe Hassan Whiteside and Andre Drummond, who can't hit the backboard when they're shooting a free throw, that's the way they're going. And that's why Miles Turner, I think, is so valuable in the Pacer system, because he has the ability to step out and knock down a three. Now, does he fall in love with that a little bit too much instead of going to the basket and making a play? I think so. But I think we're in an NBA now where Marc Gasol's hitting threes. You've got centers that probably that was never in their repertoire was to shoot three-pointers, and they would get yelled at, probably in college if they did, are now stepping out and knocking down three balls. Karl Anthony Towns can step out and hit it. Each team you look at has a big man that could probably step out and hit a three, and it's a fast-paced NBA world that's in love with a three-point shot, and I think that's why the Pacers drafted at 18 a kid that can play down low and can rebound, but can also step out and knock down the three ball. It's certainly where I think the NBA is already at and continuing to head for, and that's how you have to keep up with the Warriors of the world who are winning championships, and Toronto who can knock down the threes too. I mean, Fred VanVleet is making a living right now because he can knock down big threes. Danny Green's been in the NBA for 10 years because he can knock down the open three. Kyle Korver is still in the NBA because he can knock down threes, and I think the three-pointer, that's what kept Ray Allen in the league for so long. So that's just the way that it is, and that's the way it's going to be for the foreseeable future.
If we could change one thing about the NBA draft night, let's get rid of the hats. Everybody knew that Hayes was not going to Atlanta. He was going to be going to the Pelicans, but yet he goes up there with Atlanta Hawks hat. I'm just saying, maybe that's just one little thing that the NBA can do to enhance the NBA draft. What are your thoughts overall on the NBA draft? The NFL's did a fantastic job of creating an experience and an event and moving it around from different cities to different cities. I don't know that we'll ever get it here in Indianapolis, but we'll see. Certainly doubtful with us having the combine here, which one might wonder if that's going to still be around. But what are your thoughts overall how the NBA handles the draft? It's a little bit different because they've got the lotto pick and, a little bit different in the way they do drafts. But what do you think about as far as the way they involve the fans and the cities and how they do it?
I like it. I like the NBA draft for what it is. I think it should be sped up a little bit. They were still picking into the second round at 1 in the morning. So, like New Orleans, the number one pick, he went up there within 2 minutes. He should have been up there just standing there waiting. And they wanted the thing to start at 7:45. They should have been ready. We knew what was coming in those first 2 picks for sure, if not the first 4. So, you want to give each kid their moment, and I get it. But you really need all that time on the clock to have the commissioner walk up with a pick. We knew Zion was going to be picked first. We knew John Moran was going to be picked second. I think they'll move it around a little bit. They showed the fans, and they didn't really show them enough. But like you said, the NFL's done such a good job of creating experience. And we saw Nashville, a couple weeks ago, or end of April, was just absolutely slam-packed and you couldn't move. So I think what's going to happen with the NFL draft and the NFL Combine is the Colts at Indianapolis are going to have the Combine for another couple of years. I'd probably say 3-4 years, and then it's going to move. Even though most of the owners like it here in Indy because it's centrally located, you can get to where you need to go as far as walking without going outside. And it's a comfort thing. They want to go to St. Elmo's. Jerry Jones will be there. But I think the NFL will eventually move the Combine. In exchange, tell Indianapolis, we're going to give you the draft 1 year. So I want the Combine to stay here, but I don't expect it to stay here past 2022.
Would you rather have the draft or would you rather have the Combine? I would rather have the Combine all day long, every day. I don't know.
And I'm not I'm not a big fan of the combine. I mean, as far as the aspect of like watching guys running around in the underwear Olympics, but I think that, you know, just for businesses downtown, I mean, it's a 4 or 5 day event. Guys start getting in on Wednesday. You know, all the hotels are filled up. There's a buzz about downtown. Normally, it's, you know, it's the weather is possibly starting to get warmer, so you start getting that spring feel. So I certainly like the combine here over the draft.
Can you stick around? We got Kent Sterling on with us now. Can you stick around, or do you got to go, Tony?
No problem.
So joining us now is Kent Sterling from KentSterling.com. Also joining us is Tony Donahue of the Tony D Podcast. Kent, good morning. Welcome back to The Balance. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Tom. How you doing?
Oh, but fantastic. Tony and I are just rambling on about the draft and you know, all of that good stuff. Let's talk a little bit. I want to talk. We talked a little bit about Romeo and Carson, obviously an IU kid and a Purdue kid going to Boston. And let's talk about that Indiana connection. But you and I, before, a long time before Romeo was ever brought to IU, we talked when he hadn't even made the announcement that we thought that he would come to IU and that we thought it would be a one and done. So really no surprises there. I was a little disappointed, and as Tony just said, he kind of sleepwalked through his first year there at IU and maybe wasn't in the best of coaching situations. One, based on how he played at IU, do you think that he's ready for the NBA? What are your thoughts on Romeo and Carson teaming up out there in Boston?
Well, Romeo had a son that needed to be surgically repaired. He hurt his back. He came to IU as a freshman, as a guy who at New Albany always ran the show. He had to figure out how to become kind of that component piece rather than the focus piece. He scored 16 points a game. I don't know what anybody wanted out of the kid. He wound up being the third all-time leading freshman scorer in program history. I'm really not sure where he failed. The one place where people get him really wrong is that they think that he's indifferent to basketball, and he's not. He's just stoic. You can't read him. When he won a state championship at New Albany, which is not an easy thing, the last state championship they won was in 1973, for God's sake. That kid carried that team on his shoulder. If he's indifferent about basketball, you don't get that done. I got no problem with the way that guy played at Indiana for a year. People who had the expectation that the expectations were the problem with this guy, not this guy as a teammate, not this guy as being a productive player, not this guy balling out trying to help Indiana win as many games as he could. I got no problem with Romeo at all. And Brad Stevens, Danny Ainge, they thought he was the 14th best player in the draft. I'm going to go ahead and side with those guys. I think that he was drafted appropriately. I think over time, people are going to see him being drafted 14th as being a relative steal. If he had gone to 18 and the Pacers hadn't taken him, I would have lost my mind. He is much better than Indiana fans who had wacko expectations for this kid. He's much better than that. Physical restrictions kept him from being quite as good as maybe he could have been, but he was a damn good basketball player for Indiana. And I really don't understand all the angst surrounding Romeo. I think Carson's going to be really interesting because Carson can score. And if he can defend people, he's going to be a terrific NBA guard. He's got to learn how to be a point guard. He was an off guard at Purdue. But I think that Boston's done a really good job going out and getting two guys who are willing teammates. I think that one of the problems with analytics in basketball is that you tend to evaluate it's really hard to evaluate via analytics how guys are going to fit together. In baseball, analytics work because you've got kind of man-on-man relationships that doesn't sound right, but you've got a man against a man. You know, you've got a hitter against a pitcher. You've got a fielder against a hitter. You've got one-on-one relationships throughout the game that can be measured. With basketball, you got guys who have to fit into a system, have to fit with their teammates. To me, basketball is like jazz. You can be an outstanding player, but just not fit with a quintet of really, really good players. If you can find people that you're willing to listen to and people who are willing to listen to you in jazz, you got a chance of putting something together that's really, really cool. And I think about basketball in the same way. I think you've got to find fit, and I think that's where Danny Ainge has kind of failed a bit. I think that he realizes his error, and he's gone out and gotten two guys who are going to be willing participants on a team where guys try to fit together. And that's the problem with Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving just doesn't fit with teams. Kyrie Irving is for Kyrie Irving. And that's the problem with Kyrie Irving. He's a terrific basketball player, but he sees basketball only through his eyes, not through those of his teammates. And I think Boston is going to pivot from that and put together a team of guys who want to play together and play well together.
We're talking with Kent Sterling and Tony Donahue. Tony, I think you know Kent, but you got anything or any questions for Kent?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what he said about Romeo. You think about a kid that this time last year was graduating high school, and you had guys, grown men, showing up in candy-striped pants. Like, there was a lot of expectations, as Kent said, on this kid, and he fought through injuries. He didn't do the whole college bowl game narrative where, you know what, I've got a minor injury, I'm going to sit out. This guy played. He played his heart out when he could. People kind of questioned that first NIT game when he didn't play, but, he knew that he was going to have an NBA future, and you got to think about that in college because people may not like when I say this, but you can always go back and get a college education. You can't always go back and make the millions of dollars. So obviously you go to college and you're a student athlete. I get that. But when you know you're going to go to the NBA and all the projections say that you're going to be making a lot of money, and with the pick that he's going to get first round money and possibly pay for that second contract, you kind of have to think about that, and you can always go back. But just the realistic expectations, the unrealistic expectations, like Ken said, just that probably wears on the kid, and I think he probably feels relieved and a fresh start going to Boston with one of the best coaches in the NBA.
Well, I think a lot of those expectations are not only created by the fans, but are created by the media hype. He basically had an ESPN special, if you will, to announce that he was going to IU down there in New Albany on a smaller scale. So, there was a lot of hype. There was a lot of national hype about him, where he was going to go and so forth. So I think the media put a lot of expectations on that as well. Kent, we were also talking about the Pacers and their decision to go with this kid from Georgia, not the state, but the country. And anytime you can get an almost 7-footer that's 19 years old, you're drafting for the future. The Pacers overall, they've got some unrestricted free agents, so there may be some holes to fill there. Is he a plug-and-play guy? I don't think so. But I know a lot of people are scratching their head on why this guy, why now, Kent?
Well, you know what? We got to meet him yesterday. I got to spend a little bit of time with him yesterday. I really like him. He's an earnest guy. He says all the right things. He's got that kind of likability factor that it seems like the Pacers sort of covet. I don't know whether he can play dead. I have no idea about this guy's game. I've read scouting reports. I've watched highlight tape, but I've never seen him miss a shot. You know what I mean? I had heard of the guy because he was in mock drafts going like 15th to the Pistons, but I didn't go deep and look at him because that's not a position of need. But that's not what the Pacers do. The Pacers go out and they're going to draft a good player who fits their scheme and fits their culture, and they think that Goga is exactly that guy. Kevin Pritchard, both on the record and off the record, really, really happy that he fell to 18 and that they're going to have this kid. My lack of understanding of the pick, I don't hold them accountable to because I think that's on me. You've got Ryan Carr and you've got these European scouts. You got a room full of guys who know a whole lot more about basketball than us, and they think that he's a guy with a high ceiling, and what they also say is that he's got a really high floor, which is nice. This is a guy who, through the Euro system, has developed his fundamental sense of basketball at a really high level, and so they think that he's going to be able to come in and be a rotational guy right now. They see him fitting really nicely with Miles Turner and Domas Sabonis as kind of a threesome on that front court. And, we'll see what happens. But I'll tell you, when you meet him, you feel really good about him. He's got an interesting backstory. He survived the war. He spent part of 2008